Mikey Weinstein tells us about his book, No Snowflake in an Avalanche, which is about his battle against religious extremism in high places. But before I introduce Mr. Weinstein, I wanted to make a couple of announcements. One thing is to remind everybody to turn off their cell phones and pagers. And another thing is to point out these white coupons that were on your chairs. Some of you already have filled those out and given to me, and thank you. But for those of y'all who haven't, they help us find out, if you fill them out for us, they help us find out how you found out about the event, and that's valuable to us. And if you put your email address on them, either give them to me or drop them in this plastic bowl back here that's kind of obscured by our crowd. We have a drawing at the end of the month, and if we pull out the coupon with your email address on it, you win a $25 gift certificate to the store. I want to mention a couple of events coming up this weekend. On Saturday at 3 o'clock, Paul Secord is going to be here to talk about Albuquerque Deco and Pueblo, about that particular architectural style that was popular in the Southwest, particularly around here. And then that's at 3 o'clock on Saturday. And then at 3 o'clock on Sunday, Carolyn Dodson is going to be here to talk about her book, A Guide to Plants of the Northern Chihuahuan Desert. But that brings us to tonight's events. I could go on talking a long time about Mr. Weinstein and his accomplishments, but I'll say this about him. He is the leader of a national movement to restore the separation of church and state in the U.S. Armed Forces and other elements of the government, American government. His own family has a combined 130 years of active duty military service. Mr. Weinstein himself is a 1977 graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and he served 10 years in the Air Force as a military attorney. He also served more than 3 years as a legal counsel in the White House during the Reagan administration. He was general counsel to H. Ross Perot, the wealthy Texas businessman and two-time presidential candidate. But in 2006, he began focusing his full attention on the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. That's the nonprofit charitable organization he founded to champion the cause of separation of church and state. In addition to No Snowflake in an Avalanche, which is a title that I found out we can attribute to Voltaire and is very appropriate to the topic of his book. Maybe he'll talk to us more about him choosing that particular title. But in addition to No Snowflake in an Avalanche, he is the author of With God on Our Side, One Man's War Against the Evangelical Coup in America's Military. So here is Michael L. Weinstein. Let's have a big round of applause for him.
Thank you for this great turnout tonight. And I'm not going to sit, particularly since I know we have people in the back. And so thank you everybody for coming very, very much. This is, I think, city number 21 in 31 days for me. We also started out at page 1. So it's been kind of a death march. This one, of course, is special for a number of reasons. I first of all want to thank Bookwooks for doing the right thing. And after initially deciding it wasn't a good idea for me to be here, they listened to the community and they did the right thing, and I wish more people would do that. So, and they rescinded their disinvite, and I'd like to have a hand, please, for Bookwooks for doing that. I wanted this one to be a little bit different because I know that we have some people that have heard me speak before and others that haven't. I wrote this book for two specific reasons. The first is to try to get across to people in a graphic way how much it hurts and pains someone to stand up and do the right thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but I put my wife and my children and my parents, my family, into a very severe situation. Because when you stand up and fight intolerance, there is a price to be paid. And we've been doing this now, I think we're in our 9th year. The book is very graphic. Our publisher found out a way to put three-dimensional blood on the cover of the book. And it's kind of a primal scream. As I've gone around the country, people buy the book and then they email me or text me and call me and say, boy, that personality of yours came through in the book. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm actually getting up at 4:30 tomorrow morning after I helped edit my daughter's UNM, I think her final paper before she graduated, to go to Madison, Wisconsin. And I'll tell you why I'm going. There was a musical that came out in about 4.5 years ago called This Beautiful City. It toured around the country. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's focused on Colorado Springs. And they decided to make me a character in the musical. They've flown our family out. We saw it in New York. We saw it at the Kirk Douglas Theater in LA and a few other places. And it toured for 2 years and it stopped. And it's starting again tomorrow in Madison. So we're going out there and I'm going to give a speech, do a book signing. I think they've sold out the theater. But I got to tell you, it is very sobering to sit down and watch somebody. The person who called me to ask if I would come out is the actor who plays me. He's been studying me for a year. I didn't know that was that much video, you know, on, I've been on TV a lot. But I know the 2 times I've watched the character play me sitting in an audience in New York and LA, it made me wonder whether I would even want to go out to dinner with a guy like that. So those of you that know me know that I'm extremely flawed. And the book is focusing on what the cost is to my children, my family, my parents, not from and friends, because we've had to cleave our friends from those that will stand up for us and those that won't. The second part of the book is to explain what we do. As I stand here tonight, some of you have not heard me before, others have. We represent 27,282, 283. We picked up a new one when I was in Flying Star, getting some food before we did this. If my wife's out there, the food was definitely within the parameters of the zone diet, just so that you know. And 96% of our 27,283 clients are Protestants and Roman Catholics, being told that they're not Christian enough by fundamentalist Christians. I don't know how else to tell you than that, you know, we're not here talking tonight about anything that I would call a problem, issue, or challenge, and the book doesn't talk about that. If you want to help us, buy the book or buy several. I'd love to buy the store out here tonight because, again, Bookwooks did the right thing. I wish more people would look at this and give us a chance. If you give me, you know, well, I think there were 300 Spartans right at the Battle of Thermopylae. Give me 1 second per Spartan. I know they were all killed, but that's 5 minutes to explain what we're about, and you'll understand that I'm not the monster, our foundation, my family. We're not the monsters that the extreme religious right try to make us out to be. I've been called everything. I think the dead Jerry Falwell, and I'm very glad that he's dead, referred to me as the field general of the godless armies of Satan, and used to throw my picture up on those big jumbotrons in those fundamentalist churches around the country, putting that name under it. Our family, and we detail in the book, we go through a large series of threats pretty much on a daily basis. Every event, including this event that we go to, we have threats about it. I got one about 22 minutes ago about being here. So therefore, this is what the book talks about. What is it like to go through this? Our friends and family mostly know about this, but they don't know everything about it. I have good friends that say, now why should I buy the book? I'm with you every day. Because we actually wanted to make it clear to somebody in a professional way why this, how this expresses itself from a perspective of horror and anger that anyone could be persecuted for their religious beliefs, most of whom are Christians themselves. It's bad enough, ladies and gentlemen, if it's in the sanitation workers, or in a state legislature, or in the police department or elementary schools. It's bad enough when the separation of church and state is destroyed there. But that isn't the case here. We're talking about where all the nuclear weapons are. Do you understand? Laser-guided, conventional weapons. And the fact that we're currently in the longest war of this history, of our country's history, and we're fighting essentially the mirror image. We're fighting the fundamentalist Muslim, mostly Sunni, to some extent Shia, but mostly Sunni, Mujahideen, the terrorists, the jihadists, the insurrectionists, Al-Qaeda, right, the Taliban. What we're fighting in our military today, what I fight every day around the clock, why I'm getting up at 4:30 to go to the airport tomorrow, is the Christian Taliban. They're exactly the same as the fundamentalist Muslim Taliban, except ours are in the U.S. military. The one difference is that fundamentalist Wahhabist extremists are very happy to both kill and to die for their faith. Fundamentalist Christians, that are also known as dominionist Christians, are very happy to kill for it and not too keen to die for it. That's the only difference. And the book details case studies of Protestants, Catholics, atheists, Jews, and Muslims that are clients of ours that were willing to come forward, which is very, very hard to do because ultimately speaking truth to power is something that most of us aren't good at. I mean, no one, like, you know that feeling in the pit of your stomach. You've all felt this. Some of you, many of you probably have spoken truth to power before. To a parent, to a loved one, you know, even to children. That's not the same dynamic. To a boss is getting close. But to your military superior, it's a completely different thing. The military is a situation where you know, if you're even being gently evangelized by someone who's in charge of you in the military, you know, you can't say, get the hell out of my face. So they come to us and we do it. Nature abhors a vacuum. Remember what Frederick Douglass said, the great abolitionist, right? Power concedes nothing without a demand. So the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which I founded with my wife, we are the demanders of the commanders. That's a nice little phrase, but there's really nothing nice about doing this. It's difficult when the biggest, we've broken many stories that have gone viral, you know, around the world many times. I'm sure some of you have seen some more stories. The most shocking story occurred in late July or August of last year when 68 United States Air Force nuclear missile launch officers came to us, 62 of whom are practicing Christians, Protestants and Roman Catholics, because the Air Force was teaching them that the importance of making sure that when you launch the nukes, you do it because Jesus wants you to. They were including the end times eschatology. We were able, under something called, as some of you know, the Freedom of Information Act, to get a PowerPoint presentation. It's on our website. Wow. When we looked at that, there was a big slide in there that shows Jesus on a white horse, quoting Revelation 19:11, the book of Timothy, the book of Hebrews, and then to boot, they have a decorated Nazi SS officer, Werner von Braun, not the happy rocket scientist. He was a decorated Nazi major using Jewish slave labor at an underground laboratory to produce his rockets. He makes a statement saying that he and his fellow Nazis at the end of World War II wanted to bring their great technology to America, only to a country that was a Bible-based society. In addition, on this PowerPoint presentation, they had the faces of many of those that were ionized as a result of the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We broke the stories just several days before that. The Japanese were horrified because you're not supposed to show the faces of the dead. This was called for the Air Force pulled it after we broke the story in 48 hours. And they agreed that this was inappropriate. This is like saying that the shooting of Trayvon Martin was inappropriate. We don't use the inappropriate word because everyone in the military swears an oath, right, to protect and serve and defend the Constitution. And that represents the first time in our human history that any nation state created a governing document that didn't invoke the name of somebody's particular deity. In this country, and when the religious right looks at me and says, you know, Mikey, you and your family and your foundation, you're horrible, you're wretched, you're everything is terrible, you're demonic, which they firmly believe. You're also stupid because you don't accept the fact that America was founded as a Christian nation. And of course, they're shocked when I respond to them. Now, they won't appear with me on national TV anymore, or national radio, which we do all the time. But there was a time they would look at me and I'd say, do you understand that I agree with you? They said, what do you mean you agree? I said, America was founded as a Christian nation. There's no question about that. But not the United States of America. They had religious freedom in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. You were free to leave if you didn't like what the Puritans were doing. But when we founded this country, the constitutional framers looked at European history, where most of the horrors that had occurred had been when men of the cloth had been men of political power. They looked at Cromwell, they looked at the Salem witch trials, and they said, not here. We're not going to do that here. We're going to separate metaphysical and physical, spiritual and temporal, church and state, because we end up killing each other over this. Do you have any idea, ladies and gentlemen, how many different denominations of Christianity there are? There are 34,000, give or take. 34,000. Of our 27,283 clients, 96% again are Christian. 3/4 of that 96% are Protestants of almost every stripe that have come to us. They come to us as spiritual rape victims of fundamentalist Christian religious predators. They're not saying, gee, I feel a little uncomfortable. I feel a little inappropriate. That's not what they're doing. And and in that group we have 21 different varieties of Baptists alone. The other 1/4 are Roman Catholic. So only 4% of our clients are Jewish, like I am. You know, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, atheist, agnostic. We had a Navajo American, a Native American who happened to be Navajo, who lived in New Mexico several years ago, on a sailor, United States naval sailor, on a large aircraft carrier, who sent an email to us one day that kind of rocked our world. Just a few words. You know, brevity is the soul of wit, right? He just said, Mr. Weinstein and MRFF, thank you for being the voice that we're not allowed to speak with. Now, how do you turn that down? Do you understand what we're talking about? If you tell someone that you're stupid, you lack courage, intelligence, trustworthiness, honor, and integrity because of your chosen religious faith or lack thereof, there is no difference between that and telling someone that you're stupid because of the color of your skin or because you're a woman. Do you understand how it makes you feel? The military, for those who've been in the military, is a very adversarial, communal, and ritualistic environment. Having sexual intercourse with someone other than your spouse in the military, adultery, is still routinely punished as a felony. Now, I've defended and tried those cases. I spent 10 years as an Air Force JAG. I spent over 3 years in the West Wing of the Reagan White House. I've been around and seen all this. I never thought I would end up doing this, becoming mostly a civil rights fighter for, mostly for Christians. And I can tell you that this is a lonely, dangerous, and very expensive proposition. The book brings that out. The book should tear your heart out. I always tell the audiences that can you hear me back there? I won't be happy until I make you unhappy. I know the isotope season has started. I know March Madness is over. I know we're excited about golf and it's going to be a pleasant weekend. We're into Easter and Passover and all that stuff. But sometimes as human beings we have to care about other people. We're not just here to care about our goddamn 401ks. We're not just here to make sure we get ours. And I'm a Republican saying this. They're going to kick me out. I'm sure they already have. We're supposed to care about other people. What we've chosen to care about with laser-like precision, again, is where all the nuclear weapons are, the Marine Corps, Navy, Army, and Air Force. And our clients are, as I mentioned, members of all 4 branches. We have cadets and midshipmen at the Naval Academy, which is my father's alma mater, the Air Force Academy, where my 2 sons, my daughter-in-law went, my brother went there, my brother-in-law graduated, my soon-to-be son-in-law just graduated, he's an Air Force pilot, and half of my family is Christian. This isn't a political spectrum left or right issue, right? It's a constitutional right and wrong issue. When my son-in-law graduated from pilot training 2 or 3 weeks ago, this was at a particular Air Force base. I was met with a bunch of our clients because we had an issue, another serious issue of fundamentalist Christian religious oppression. I was able to make some calls to the Pentagon, and in fact, now the extreme Christian right is demanding congressional hearings about Mikey because of my extreme access to the Pentagon. And I'm happy to, of course, I'd kill to do that one. I want to see them call Boeing and Northrop and Lockheed Martin in to find out about their access to the Pentagon. But we were able to bring a big crap burner to fall on the head of the people that were running the base, and they actually put up a very hasty staff meeting. So I went sauntering in there while my family was doing something else, probably not happy that I was doing this. And the whole staff was there, and the wing commander looked at me, and I knew he had just had his ass kicked from the people up the line, because again, there's only 2 things that the Pentagon, or the Pentecostal gun as we call it, has weaknesses. Like Superman has a weakness of kryptonite, and from my geek patrol I'm told magic. The Pentagon is susceptible only to exposure in the media and being dragged into federal and state court, which we do with regularity. So here we are, and we sit down, and the first thing he says to me is, Mr. Weinstein, we've received a higher headquarters notification today that the thing that you didn't like, we took off of the Air Force website. What we didn't like, of course, we had 42 clients at this very relatively small pilot training base. One of his flying squadron commanders, training squadron commanders, had posted a proselytizing message on the Air Force Base website and also the Air Force Print News website. Blatantly proselytizing. They took it down. The colonel looked at me and said, I just have a question to ask you. And I realized that this was going to become, this guy was bringing a rubber knife to a gunfight, and I had all my guns with me. And to impress his staff, he said, where does it say in that First Amendment, Mr. Weinstein, separation of church and state?
What?
Where does it say in the First Amendment, separation of church and state?
Okay.
Now, like I haven't heard this 8 gazillion times before, so I just smiled, and unaccustomed, I let a few seconds pass. I'm a bit loquacious, and I said, Colonel, that just tells me everything I need to know about you. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, first of all, let me ask you a question. If you were arrested for a felony and tried, do you have the right to a fair trial? He said, yes, it's in the Constitution. I said, really? Where is it in the Constitution? He goes, well, you're the constitutional lawyer. He had his JAG there and a bunch of other people. So it must have been 15, 20 people in the ring. And the lawyers had that dull look of a trapped animal in their eyes. And I just said, well, Colonel, actually, you know what? It's not in the Constitution. You have the right to a speedy and public trial. You have no right to a fair trial in our Constitution. But you get a fair trial. How did that come about? Something we call case law. And if you're arrested, you've all watched CSI and going back to Dragnet, right? You get to be read your constitutional rights. That's not in the Constitution. And what was the case name of that one? Miranda, which is the name of a Supreme Court case that just took a look at our Constitution and decided to construe what the framers meant by this, right? I can give you 2 million more examples of this. So the colonel was looking back at that, and I said, don't say anything more. He kept trying to say something. I know exactly who you are and what you are now. And I know that the people we fight, view the separation of church and state as like, it's a myth like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. But that doesn't get you out of it, Colonel, because that was, you know, that was passed, that was the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, which was passed in March of 1791. 15 months earlier, the body of our Constitution was passed, and that included Clause 3, Article 6. When people scream at me, John 3:16, Mikey, I come back with Constitution 3:6. My wife just made a T-shirt. I was giving a speech out at Fort Bragg last week, and it has Constitution 3:6 on it. Now, what is that? It says no religious test. No religious test for any position in the federal government. You know, so I look back, and of course I'm looking at the Colonel now, he's all blanched, and they're all looking around, and I said, you know, I know you think that I'm Godzilla. Now, let me tell you something. I speak at colleges and universities all over the country. I finally got a chance to speak at my alma mater, where I'm constantly reminded that I'm the most despised graduate in the history of the Air Force Academy, and they say that as though that upsets me. You know, that's a badge of courage. Remember, I told you I'm highly flawed. I get off on that. That's awesome. And when they announced that I was coming to speak to the cadets in February of 2010, the local newspaper, their version of the Albuquerque Journal, the Colorado Springs Gazette, ran a headline. I kid you not, it said, Academy's own Godzilla invited to speak to cadets. Can you imagine the Albuquerque Journal doing that? You know, I mean, not that, I mean, there may be somebody here from the Journal tonight. If you are, you know, I know that you can raise your hand. You here, David? All right. Anyway. The book. Don't leave tonight. I know it's $18, and if you went to Flying Star and got an entree or something, it would cost that. You can help us by buying the book or 5. You know, just like when people have bad breath, remember the old Scope commercials, you'd leave it on their desk and then run away? That's not truth to power. Sit down and tell Barbara, we've worked here at Acme Corporation for 10 years. You have halitosis. Rather than leaving it there and running away. Most of us don't like to tell someone who's talking in a movie theater to shut the F up, right? I know that. I tried to hide the bruise I had on my shoulder 2 years ago when I got into a fight in a movie theater for telling somebody to shut up. But most of us know that feeling. What do? Do I say something? Do I not say something? It'll rock the boat. It'll upset somebody.
Who'd you try to hide the
From my wife,
bruise
yes.
from?
It was very hard to see where the bruise was, so I had to tell her what happened. So, the bottom line is, I can't explain all the 27,283 client stories we have, because most of our clients don't want to be known. And I couldn't really put anonymous stories in the book, but the ones that I have will shock you. They will shock you. The inextricable intertwining of fundamentalist Christian doctrine, which espouses the concept that, yes, I admit I'm here on Earth, but I'm not of this planet. You know, I'm of the next world, and we need to use our nuclear weapons under St. Augustine's just war theory to blow it up, because that'll help Jesus bring us back. If my last name was Smith, or Contry, or Meyer, it would be very, very different. But my last name is Weinstein. And it's not O. Weinstein, you know. I'm not, and so people know if you're worldly enough that, yeah, that's probably not a Czechoslovakian name. That's probably not, you know, it's from South Africa. It's a Jewish last name. Plus, I chose a profession, you know, being a lawyer. You merge Jew with lawyer, what do you get? You get the Pharisees. We all know what they did. Oh yeah, they blamed the Romans. They were just the puppets, right? So the people we're fighting, you can tell by their smell. They smell bad. They have 4 or 5 particularly disgusting smells about them. I usually describe it, the stench that would assault your nostrils malodorously as you walk upon an arroyo in our home state on a hot July afternoon. You know, the wafting up from the corpses of 10,000 rotting swine is the stench of virulent homophobia, virulent misogyny. Now, I know some of you are here tonight from the other side because you follow me around the country. Make sure you take notes down and then stand up during Q&A. We're almost done. Virulent anti-Semitism, virulent Islamophobia, and then the virulent desire to subordinate what they view as the pristine, weaponized gospel of Jesus Christ to this horrible thing we call the Constitution, which is just man's law. Now, let me make sure you understand who our targets are. If I draw a circle in the sky about Christianity, and I wish I could change the title of my first book, which came out from St. Martin's Press, was the largest publisher in New York. The publisher we have here is in New York and LA, but smaller, and I love them much better. St. Martin's wouldn't even let me choose my title. The title they chose for me, because if they give you an advance, they own you, right, was With God on Our Side, and the subtitle was One Man's War Against an Evangelical Coup in America's Military. Please, fellow Albuquerqueans, adjust your seatbelts and pick up your tray tables. I'm going to shock you now, because it turns out that our largest growth area for people coming to us begging for help, and they come by the hundreds each month, are evangelical Christians. You see, if you look at Christianity as this circle, on your right and my left, let's put a Rio Grande right down the middle. And I thought the people we were fighting, it took me a few years to figure this out, you have mainline Protestants and Roman Catholics here. Their main rubric of Christianity that they follow is called the Great Commandment. And it's talked about in the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus. The book of Matthew is the best recitation of it. The two big things are, look, love the Lord your God with all your mind, soul, and heart, and treat your neighbor the way you want to be treated. The golden rule, which is, of course, in the Torah, the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, before Jesus, and before a Torah, it was codified in the Code of Hammurabi. So it goes back a little. That's the Great Commandment. Mainline Protestants and Catholics follow that. When you cross the Rio Grande and get into this territory, you have evangelicals and fundamentalists. I thought they were all the same. I was wrong. Because there's a second Rio Grande over here on your left and my right. It goes right down the middle. Yeah. Now on this side of the first Rio Grande, evangelicals and fundamentalists follow something called the Great Commission, much more so than they follow the Great Commandment. It's one of the last things Jesus is supposed to have talked about. Mark 16:15, Matthew 28:19. Go and make disciples. Make disciples, for those in the back, of all nations. It's a commission, and we got to go proselytize. What I didn't know then, but I know now, is that evangelicals are saying, whoa, yeah, I want to turn everybody into this room into a Christian like me, but I have to comport with the time, the place, and the manner restrictions put forth by our U.S. Constitution and its construing federal and state case law. And with the evangelicals, we have no quarrel. They're now on our board. They donate to us. They're clients of ours. But you see, what the fundamentalists do, are there children in here? They go like this. F that. There's no time, place, and manner in which you can tell me to stop proselytizing, pursuant to the Great Commission. I will scream Jesus in a crowded theater. I don't have to pay attention to that Constitution, and certainly not those activist judges out there. So can you imagine evangelical Christians being persecuted? The number is 365, one for every day of the year except for leap year, like this year, at my alma mater, the Air Force Academy, of MRFF clients. And of that number, 322 are Christians. We have one who is out, and he's talked about in the book. He's a conservative Republican evangelical Christian. When he joined us in a lawsuit against the Academy last year, shortly thereafter, he has a service dog. He has a disability. He's been a professor for 13 years there. While he was teaching, his dog was poisoned. The dog's name is Caleb, even a biblical, almost died. Then the Academy decided that they're in the process, they just didn't renew his contract. It's been 13 years, time to go. We are currently suing the Air Force Academy under EEO provisions for this thing. But that beautiful little Labrador almost died. And he's the one client who's out. Our family have had the windows shot out of our house, swastikas and crucifixes painted on the house, animals slaughtered and put on the front porch of the house, tires slashed, water bottles, feces thrown at the house. And that's just here in Albuquerque, where we're generally fairly laid back. So again, if you want to do this, I always tell people this is not like riding a unicorn through a cotton candy forest, handing out lollipops to little forest animals that are singing in unison in English. It's blood sport. It's hard to do. And the book talks about it. It's not a long book, but if you read it, you'll understand what's going on. And if you say, well, why would I do, what do I want to do? Well, you want to help. By buying the book, you help. By buying it, and everybody has somebody who's in the military. And when I give speeches, I give a speech in Seattle a few weeks ago, a ton of people there, and someone stood up, as they always do, and said, Mr. Weinstein, I'm a U.S. Marine. I knew you were coming here. I've been in for 14 years. I've never seen this. And I said, thank you very much, Gunny, for your service. Let me ask you, and by the way, they're almost always over the age of 35, white, Protestant, Anglo-Saxon males. I said, where are you from? He goes, what do you want to know? He said, he's from Pittsburgh. I said, do they ever have murders or rapes or armed robberies in Pittsburgh? He was quiet, and he said, yes. I said, have you ever seen one? He said, no. Well, then how could they ever have them if you haven't seen one? Adolf Hitler had 7.9% in his National Socialist movement to get it going. Stalin had 2.9%. Our best stats is that 28 to 32% of the United States military are fundamentalist dominionist Christians. We had a horrible problem. I was born at Kirtland Air Force Base. We had a horrible problem there until the commanding general is fantastic. We had a run-in a year ago, a screaming match, but he listened. And we don't have a single problem there now. He's a Catholic. One of the highest-ranking generals in the Pentagon, who's the chief information officer, one of my classmates, whose last name actually is Lord, has been a commander. I know, it's hard to believe, isn't it? As a commander, has never had any, he's a Protestant. No problems with this, none whatsoever. if people will give us a chance to explain ourselves, like Bookwooks here, because everyone knows initially, you know, they didn't want me here for fear of that their word was fomenting discord in the evangelical community and in Kirtland. But they listened to what was out there and said, wait a minute, maybe we made a mistake. So I'm here tonight. We get this a lot. But I have family members. I have classmates from the academy and close friends that have turned their backs and walked away. Does that hurt? It does. You get used to it. You know, we used to have a lot of financial resources. We were thinking about retiring here, there, whatever. That's gone now. I'm not doing it to say how great we are, what hubris and whatever. I'm trying to say that this is, we have formed the spear. We have the point of the spear and you're looking at it. We have about 90 people in this foundation, most of whom are full-time volunteers all over the country. A research department in New Jersey. We have 8 law firms that work for us, including the second largest one in the world. We have 4 Nobel Peace Prize nominations. We're the only New Mexico organization to ever be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's given out in Oslo each year in October. This past October we lost for the 2nd year in a row. We had 2 nominations for 2010 and 1 for 2011. But what was interesting is that this was the heaviest nomination year ever for the Peace Prize. Shorty, do you have some water? Thanks, bro. And only 54 organizations worldwide, thank you, were nominated. Only 54. Do we get covered by the Albuquerque Journal? No. I mean, we got to make sure we cover something related to, I don't know. I'm not going to say what it is. So we have a local, this is Albuquerque, and I was born and raised here. I tell people that when my mom was pregnant with me, she was eating Albuquerque food and drinking Albuquerque beverages. So I've got it in my body. I'm not going to go anyplace else. But you know, like I said, what does it take to be a human being to wake up to what's happening here? We're all going to go back. We'll be in bed in 2 or 3 hours, and then a bunch of us will not remember this tomorrow morning. If you have the book, you'll remember. And again, we are supposed to. I've always felt you could wipe out those 10 Judeo-Christian commandments and replace them with Mikey's 5 commandments. And I know what an asshole that makes me sound like. But I have my own 5 commandments. Number 1, love each other. Number 2, help each other. Number 3, do not be a perpetrator. Number 4, do not be a victim. And number 5 is my most important one. Do not be a bystander. There are those who refer to me as a hero, which is completely wrong. The heroes are our members of the military. Are you a hero when you sit on your lawn chair on a Saturday drinking a beer and you watch a 1-year-old walk out into a busy residential street? Well, if you throw the beer down and go save the kid, what, you're a hero? You're doing what you're supposed to do. We have a founding document in this country, which means that you shouldn't have to feel any sense of a knot in your stomach because of how you view the damn sunset. Don't tell me that this is a Christian nation. Don't tell me that Jesus Christ, the right version of Jesus Christ, is all that's going to matter, otherwise you're worthless to me. Do you know when I said no religious test? Let me tell you what your U.S. Air Force did while all of you slept and didn't notice it. On Tuesday, July 12th, 2005, which is the first time we went into court, your United States Air Force, with all of its nukes and all of its B-1 bombers and all its F-16s and F-22s and F-15s, decided they wanted to make an announcement. So they chose the newspaper they hate the most because they wanted to make sure they would send a strong, that means they had to be fully vetted. What would that paper be, anybody? The New York Times. On the front page, they had the then #2 ranking chaplain, a monstrosity who I'd like to beat the head in of, by the name of Brigadier General Cecil R. Richardson, 1 star, subsequently by George W. Bush promoted to a 2nd star. He's now still the head of the chaplain's corps. He makes an announcement on the front page of the New York Times, not the Washington Times and not on Fox News. They want to make a statement here. The statement was the United States Air Force's new policy is to reserve its right to evangelize anyone it determines to be unchurched. So, Homer and Marge Simpson America did nothing. And I guess the Air Force will hold, what, a religious Geiger counter up to the world? Anybody? And if it comes back and says you're this thing called unchurched, remember this is a religious test in direct violation of Clause 3, Article 6, to that colonel I was talking about, that actually says the words there, not like the separation of church and state, which isn't. The words aren't actually in the First Amendment. They'll hold a religious Geiger count up to anybody. And if it comes back and says that you're this thing called unchurched, the Air Force will decide this. Why our Air Force reserves the right not to Islamicize or Judaize or Catholicize or mainline Protestantize or Buddhize or Hinduize or atheize or Wiccanize. They reserve the right to evangelize you. Do any of you see how this is blowing off the arms and taking the lives of our members of the military? Could we be doing anything that sounds more, or to act as a greater accelerant or lubricant for already angry and pissed off Islamic young men and women in Tunisia, even Syria, Lebanon, Egypt? I could, Jordan, to want to come and join the cause. We look exactly like the 10th version of the 9 prior crusades. The first one began in 1096. The Crusaders wore helmets. It's not hard to remember what they looked like because 4.5 years ago in New Mexico at Cannon Air Force Base, we had the 532nd Attack F-16 Squadron, with the F-16s equipped to carry nuclear, laser-guided, and conventional weapons. The squadron was called the Crusaders. Drawn on every F-16, on their patches, on the fuselage, and on the patches of everybody in the squadron, in their squadron buildings, was the gigantic helmet of a Crusader from the year 1096. To the left of the helmet was a giant broadsword, and to the right was a huge crucifix. We stopped it. The moment we stopped it, the Air Force said, oh, we were always going to mothball that squadron. So everything sounds better in Latin. Quis custodiet ipsos custodos. Quis custodiet ipsos custodos. What, you don't speak Latin? That means who will guard the guards. And it's the guardians and the military that allow us to be here on a Thursday night and do all of the stuff we're going to do after for the rest of the weekend, etc. But apparently we're the only organization that, again, focuses with laser-like precision on the military. So we wrote a book, the second book, to explain what we're doing, begging people to give us those 300 seconds and give us time to explain. I mean, I'll make a bold statement. You read the book or you listen to me, I don't know how you can be against anything that I'm saying, and damn it, don't tell me that we agree to disagree. That's how every rape and war starts. Because disagreeing with me is like disagreeing with the statement. If someone makes a statement that it's a bad idea to pour gasoline on newborn German Shepherd puppies and light them up, who could disagree with that statement? Who can disagree with what we're doing with our foundation? Now, if you want to understand the level of disagreement, go to the website, listen carefully, it's intuitive, militaryreligiousfreedom.org. I've got some business cards with me. Read the book. You will see text, you will see audio, you'll see visual. You'll see well-made videos with people standing in front of the chapel at the Air Force Academy and in the Pentagon, making it clear that we want all of our cadets and midshipmen to graduate as, quote, government-paid missionaries for Jesus Christ. Is that why you pay your taxes? Again, when we do that, when we look like the Crusaders, we commit to 3 E's. The first one is we enrage our Islamic allies. Look at the burning of the Quran at Bagram. You don't think we have people that are involved with that? Of course we do. Of course we do. A week before that happened, we broke the story of the fact that we created a new forward operating base. We're building Afghanistan for the Afghans. And by the way, they don't like to be called Afghanis, but they prefer to be called Afghans. And it's called FOB, and there's always a name after it, Forward Operating Base. Well, we had 21 U.S. military members and 10 ANA members come to us a week before the Bagram thing. Afghan National Army. And our service people are part of the ISAF, International Security Assistance Force. They came to us because they were upset that a fist fight almost broke out at this particular forward operating base. Once the Afghans, they were being taunted by our soldiers saying, hey, you know what, we're turning you into an Aryan nation. Any of you know the term Aryan? The white Superman, Superwoman from Hitler? Well, do you know why they were being taunted? Because we named the base FOB Aryan. That's right. Immediately the Pentagon said, no, 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 Mikey's wrong. It was a misspelling. It meant to be Ariana. But of course, we had the contracting officer. For any of you that do federal procurement, we had the contracting officer and we had the documents. We had the emails back and forth saying, this is going to kill our troops if we do this. A week before that, we broke the story of the Marine Scout snipers. We had a bunch of them with the American flag, and underneath it, they had the flag of the Nazi SS. SS for Scout Sniper. Oh, they wouldn't know any better. They wouldn't know any better. I'm tired, but I appreciate this gigantic crowd. You know, I thought that mostly like 8 people would come out, and some of those people would be my very close friends. My mom and dad, my daughter, her friends, my wife. So I'm very, very appreciative of this. I will tell you that what we're up against is, you know, you remember what was the big warning we got from a president called Eisenhower. His most famous speech was his last speech. What did he warn America about? The military-industrial complex. The fear of the fusing of these gigantic contractors with our gigantic military budget. What we're fighting about tonight, I'm the leader of it, is nothing less than a fundamentalist Christian, or known as Dominionist Christian, parachurch military corporate congressional proselytizing complex. What is a parachurch organization? There's 24 of them running rampant through the military. One of them, one of the largest, is called the Officers Christian Fellowship. We think there's 15 to 20,000 officers in this, in the entire military. 1.4 million in under uniform in all of our military. But remember, when you graduate as a second lieutenant from the Air Force Academy, you immediately outrank 80% of the rest of the Air Force because you're an officer. When I speak at colleges and universities, whether they're Ivy League or whatever, I will ask for a show of hands. Can anyone here tell me the difference between a general and a sergeant or a private? Most of them can't. Somebody back there raised their hand. I understand that. When I ask them to tell me the difference between an officer and a non-commissioned officer, they can't. You know, the level of stupidity and ignorance in this country is palpable. It really is. Officers Christian Fellowship, until a very short time ago when they changed their express goal and purpose, 3 purposes, because we were hammering them in the media. And we know they changed them only internally because one of their top people is one of our moles. And again, they're on every military base, including Kirtland. Number 1, we want to see a spiritually, we want Christian officers exercising biblical leadership to raise up a godly military. Let's change some of the words around. We want Islamic officers exercising Quranic leadership to raise up a Mahdi army of Allah. You getting the point? The 3 purposes. A, we want to see a spiritually transformed United States military. B, with ambassadors for Christ in uniform. That hasn't worked out too well for planet Earth the last 2,000 years. Number 3, empowered by the Holy Spirit. Their chief Bible study that they push on their helpless, and I mean with a capital H, helpless, military subordinates. We will not allow the opposition, all of which is spearheaded by Satan, to prevent us from regaining territory for Jesus Christ in the U.S. military. Look at their videos, look at their budgets. Their combined budgets are in the billions. Ours is under $1 million a year, significantly put in by my wife and myself until very recently. But somebody has to fight this. It must be fought. You have a responsibility if you've been in this country and you've enjoyed the fruits of everything that's happened in this country. You're a stakeholder, a shareholder on this. My former boss, Ross Perot, my father's classmate from the class of '53 at the Naval Academy, when he ran unsuccessfully for president, and I'm not that upset that he didn't get in, I might add, but he's a good guy. He talked to everybody, he talked about members of being, when you're a citizen, you are a shareholder, a stockholder in this country. Well, you have a responsibility. You're like the person drinking, I don't care, a Sprite or a beer on that Saturday morning that we talked about. I'm telling you that your United States military has been overrun by the Christian Taliban. In one sentence, a fanatical religiosity, not fundamentalist Islam, mixed in with actual weapons of mass destruction, which we have, the other side doesn't yet, knock on wood, mixed in with a tortured, poisonous version of patriotism, quote unquote, further mixed in with completely unfettered access because of the draconian specter of military command influence, further mixed in with a total dearth of any restraint, oversight, and supervision, and what you have is an internal national security threat to this country. Every bit as much in formidability, width, breadth, and magnitude as what we're facing externally by resurgent Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and the jihadists, the insurrectionists, and the terrorists. It's a national security threat. I was asked when I did an interview a couple of years ago with Dan Rather. He was no longer at CBS. He's with HDNet now, which is that big cable news network owned by Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. We did a 3.5-hour interview in New York. And I really liked Dan. I know I was always worried because he always hits you with these zinger questions when you don't expect him, and I didn't get any zinger questions. He was just completely grooving on exactly everything we said, and I could see in the breaks that he was completely supporting us. And then at the end of the interview, he said, "Now, Mikey, you and your family and your foundation are often criticized for being unpatriotic at a time when we were involved in one covert war," he meant Pakistan, not so covert anymore, and 2 overt wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So how do you respond to the charges of being unpatriotic? Now this time I was fine. You usually think of these great pithy things to say, like when my wife gets mad at me, I'll think of something a week or 2 later that I should have said. But this time I had the perfect response, and it was provided by Howard Zinn, one of the greatest, now recently passed away, greatest historians in American history. He wrote A People's History of the United States, which you really have to read. It gives the perspective of American history from people of color, women, African Americans, like I mentioned, Native Americans, trade unionists, and it's a completely different perspective. And I said, you know, Dan, I don't have to reply to that charge because Howard Zinn did it for me. And he said, how's that? And I said, he said that dissent is the highest form of patriotism. And as Malcolm X said, yes, Malcolm X, who I understand much better now, I will never raise my hand and sing, "We shall overcome," but I will sing, "We will come over." Thank you for the chance of being here tonight, everybody. I'm going to do some Q&A, but please, before you leave, buy some books. Let's sell them out tonight, read what this is all about, and I'm happy to answer some questions, and I know the gentleman back there has been pining up. I'll get you next. Yes, sir.
I have the book. I'm going to buy it. God bless you, Mickey.
It's Mikey. It's okay.
I am not here to defend the Albuquerque Journal, which I do subscribe to. I'm not a conservative. But the reason why I'm here is I believe they did mention that you were going to be here in the Sunday edition.
No, I'm just saying that, that they might have wanted to do something about the fact that, you know, we got the Nobel Peace Prize nomination, 4 of them in 3 years, and a million other things. I will occasionally have a reporter call me up saying, well, how come you didn't come to us first in this story? I mean, you're right here in Albuquerque, because we break our stories oftentimes. I'll tell you something, on the Nazi SS thing, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. I did 36 interviews. I'm sorry, I did 112 interviews in 36 hours. Ask my wife, I didn't get out of my underwear for 2 days when we broke that. That had over 16 million news agency hits around the world. Of the 112 interviews that we did, I had 71 were domestic, the rest were overseas. For every reporter I did overseas, and the biggest networks overseas, all of them, not one of them was unaware of what the Nazi SS was. Of the 70-some-odd American reporters I dealt with, some of them who graduated from Brown, Dartmouth, UCLA, 20% had never heard of the Nazi SS. They apologized. They said, well, what is that? Isn't that the S sign that the rock group KISS uses? You know, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed as an American. You know, we don't teach in our schools, and we have some young people here tonight. You think they know about the Battle of Khe Sanh in Vietnam? You think they know anything about the Gulf of Tonkin incident? Forget that. You think they know anything about Korea? On my advisory board, I have Mike Farrell from the TV show MASH. One of our biggest supporters is Ed Asner. Yes, they're liberals, if that matters. I mean, like I said, what does that even mean? I mentioned this is not a political spectrum left or right issue, right? At all. Our biggest donors tend to be very conservative Republicans. They don't want to be known that they're donating because they're afraid they're going to get 1/10 of what my family has to deal with. But those are our biggest donors. We also have Richard Lamb, the 3-term governor of Colorado. We have admirals and generals. What we fight is worse in the Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the Air Force PJs, which train here, the Green Berets, the Special Operations, Special Forces. It's particularly accentuated there. Do you remember when we shot bin Laden? And of course, I'm glad that he's dead. But the state was EKIA, EKIA, Geronimo, Geronimo, for God and country. Really? We kill people for God? Is that what we're doing in this country? How many more people? Look, how do you think they find the young men and women to dig the holes to hide the IEDs, to put the IEDs together, to fire the RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, or to blow themselves up? They have to have them committed to jihad. And when we act the way we do and do the things that we do, we are killing our members of the military. Most people in Congress do not have their children in the military. Most celebrities don't have their children in the military. I have mine in. And I bet some of you do also. Next question. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you very much for what you're doing. My wife and I spent 5 wonderful years at your alma mater back in the 60s. My career in the Air Force came to a very abrupt ending.
Can I ask you to stand up so they can hear you? Sure. This is important.
My career in the Air Force came to a very abrupt end. I was Secretary of the Inter-American Defense Board, part of the Organization of American States. And Ronald Reagan sent an Army general to the board to clean the place up. He was the chairman of the board. After a while, we could not get along together, so who's going to leave? Not General Schweitzer, but Colonel Green. And one of the things that he insisted upon was to have religious services in our building on a weekly basis. And every day, religion was in our building. And that's one of the write-ups that I sent to the Pentagon with my resignation. Now, try to explain this to our friends from South America when they come to me and say, will you please try to do something with General Schweitzer, because the Mexicans, they have a greater separation of church and state than what we do. They cannot go to service in uniform. But General Schweitzer, if he could have made them go to service, he certainly would have. So that's back in 1984. We were still faced with that situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I'm going to tell you all a story. Some of you may have heard this before, but I want to make sure you understand just how pervasive this stuff is. When people ask me, I gotta find something to drop. All right, how bad is it, Mikey? And I had a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff call me back to the Pentagon about 3.5 years ago, and I looked at this person who commands one of our 4 branches. I won't say which. Actually, he was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force because the New York Times covered this meeting we had. He asked, "How bad is it?" And I said, "General Schwartz, pick up your pen." He said, "What?" I said, "Just pick up your pen, hold it 6 inches over your desk, and drop it." And I said, "Why did it drop?" And he goes, "Well, gravity, duh, right?" I said, "That's how bad, how systemic and ubiquitous, out of control fundamentalist Christianity is in the military." Let me tell you all the story. It'll take 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I may have lost my pen. Here we go. I've told this story before. It's hard for me to tell because it tears my heart out, and it takes me back to it again. It was a Saturday here in Albuquerque, a little over 4 years ago. It was about I think it was 1:38 p.m. I was about to watch a baseball game on ESPN, and the call came in on the satellite phone, as they do around the clock, from an Army sergeant. Let me take you through theater of the mind. Just bear with me on this. Sergeant calls in. He's choking up. He's crying on the phone, and he's told me, among other things, that he's embarrassed that he's crying, and that this is his 3rd combat tour. Just so you know, we have 27,000 members of our U.S. military who are American citizens, young men and women under the age of 25, who are now on their 7th military tours in the downrange in the combat zone. He's told me he's won the Bronze Star and Purple Heart twice, and I said, "Sergeant, you don't have to tell me this. Well, what's the problem?" He said, "I want you to know that it's not easy for me to cry." And this hurts to even tell this story. The story starts, he said, 6 weeks prior, when his team was in a part of Baghdad that some of you may have heard of called Sadr City, where Muqtada al-Sadr and his Mahdi army ruled. It's about 2.5 million people, particularly bad part. Think of Hell's Kitchen in New York, but really big. And it's mostly Shia, not Sunni. And his job was to lead a fire team out to make the Iraqis know that the Americans are here now, and we're going to bring democracy and peace. Saddam had not yet been, I think he'd just been captured. But his job was to calm the populace, let them know America is here and it's okay. They get a call, this is 6 weeks ago, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They rush out to this corner in Sadr City. Now, for those of you who've been there, the dust in the Middle East is so fine that it's like particulate. And when there's been an IED explosion like this was, what's left of the bodies merges with the dust, leaving a red haze. The bone, the intestines, the organs, the flesh, it becomes like it's a red fog, and you're actually breathing it in. He's describing this to me, and I've heard it before. And he says, what happened was I looked over, and we fanned out my entire unit, and on one corner I saw a little boy, must have been 7 years old, screaming inconsolably, screaming, Ahmed, 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 Ahmed. I ran over to him, Mr. Weinstein. He was covered in what looked like strawberry jelly, but that was Ahmed. That was his street brother who took the brunt of the IED explosion. It killed 27 people, but Ahmed was too close. And there are a lot of little children that run around Sadr City because their parents have been killed. There's no children, youth, and family services there. And so they live on the streets. They're called street children. And of course, Muhammad was horrified that Ahmed had been turned into this jelly. He's covered with Ahmed. The sergeant takes the little boy's name was Muhammad, takes him back to his base, violating regulations. Long story short, over the course of the next 6 weeks, he gets into loco parentis. He becomes almost like the father to Muhammad. His mission is to get Muhammad to try to forget what happened to Ahmed right in front of his own eyes. After 3 weeks, the sergeant tells me I fall in love with the little boy. I call my wife at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where the 82nd Airborne is. 92,000 of our troops in an immense base. I gave a speech there just last Saturday. And we have 2 kids, and I asked if she would have a problem if we adopted Muhammad. She was all for it. Now, you have to understand that the Iraqis and Afghans aren't big on Americans taking their children away. But he was prepared to fight it. His command was interested in trying to follow it up. They were going to try to reach out to the ambassadors. And things were going along great. Flash forward to today. He's on the phone with me. Not every night, but some nights, the sergeant was allowed to have Muhammad stay on the base with him. But not last night. Almost exactly at the same time today, the alarm goes off. This time there was an IED explosion, also in Sadr City, not far, a couple blocks away from the one that happened 6 weeks ago. Sergeant gets his team together, large team, the company goes rushing out there. They're there to say, America's here, calm the populace, we're Americans. In the back of his mind, he's thinking, God damn it, I wish Muhammad had been with me that fight, but I'm sure it'll be okay. He rushes out to the scene. Again, the particulate of the blood and the body parts are mixed with the very fine dust. And he sees the one thing, ladies and gentlemen, he never wants to see. He sees Muhammad screaming inconsolably, Ahmed, 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 Ahmed. He said, I was so shocked because I was terrified he would be dead, and now I knew that he had shrapnel in him. He said, I dropped my weapon. He dropped his weapon in a combat zone. A guy who won a Bronze Star. He's a staff sergeant. He's an E5. He runs to Muhammad and he tears his clothes off. The little boy is screaming inconsolably. His tears and his snot are mixing with all the mud, but he can't find any blood. But he knows that the shrapnel often goes in very small and comes out very large. He tears off and he can't find any holes anywhere. The little boy is screaming worse than he was 6 weeks ago. He's screaming, Ahmed, Ahmed, Ahmed. The sergeant, now without his weapon, he has his sidearm but doesn't have his rifle, calls for the interpreter to come over. The interpreter comes over. He screams at the interpreter, what's happening? The interpreter gets the little boy's attention, and they say something back and forth. The interpreter's eyes get large, and his face blanches. And he tells, the sergeant goes, what? He says, he says, look at his hand. The sergeant looks at his hand, it's not bleeding. He has a piece of paper in it. The interpreter says, take that out of his hand. It was a tussle, but he took out the piece of paper from the 7-year-old's hand, who is still screaming, Ahmed, Ahmed, but not as audibly, not as loudly now. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, piece of paper? It was a cartoon. A 4-panel, 4-color cartoon. 4 cells. In the first cell, it shows a clearly Arabic man walking down a street in an Arabic city like Baghdad, because there are Arabic signs there, walking next to an American soldier in his battle dress uniform. Cell 1. Cell number 2, there's an explosion. IED, RPG, suicide bombing, whatever. Like what had just happened. Cell number 3 shows the soldier in his battle dress uniform sitting at the right hand of Jesus, who's on his throne.
Oh my.
And in cell number 4, the Arabic man is inflamed, is encircled in a pillar of fire. And there's Arabic written underneath it explaining, so in case you didn't know what was happening. Muhammad is illiterate, like many adults are there, but he got the idea very quickly, where Ahmed now was. The sergeant was enraged. The interpreter was stunned. The sergeant screamed to the interpreter to ask Muhammad where he had gotten that. Muhammad broke up in his screaming to say something in Arabic to the interpreter. The interpreter was shocked. He turned his body shortly and pointed over to the 9 o'clock position. At the 9 o'clock position was our staff sergeant's West Point graduate, Army captain, company commander, handing out as many copies of that cartoon to the Iraqis there as possible. On our Bradley fighting vehicles and on our tanks in Baghdad, we were painting in red paint in Arabic, Jesus killed Muhammad. You guys, we write about it in the book, and we have the audio and we have the visual. It's very hard to come forward and tell this story. And again, many people who didn't come tonight, and many people that look at this but say nothing, you remember what Martin Luther King said, that in the end we remember not the words of our enemies, and we have many, but the silence of our friends, and there comes a time when silence becomes betrayal. You're here tonight. That means something to us. Buy the book, buy them out tonight. Show it to people. Next question. Yes, sir.
I was telling your story last weekend to a Navy chaplain at our church. He says...
Can you make sure they can hear you too, sir?
Yeah, he says the Navy doesn't have the same kinds of problems that the Air Force. What's your response to
Yes,
him?
I would say my response would be bullshit. And there are other words I would say, but I can't sit there and go, oh, fiddlesticks, good gravy, that's such a falsehood. It is, and we describe naval stories in the book as well. Look, it is completely and totally out of control. We have a naval chaplain, a former naval chaplain graduate from the Air Force Academy, who 3.5 years ago decided to start asking Jesus, do you know what a fatwa is in Islam? It's a death prayer. In fundamentalist Christianity, they're called imprecatory prayers. This naval chaplain, who was discharged from the Navy, but of course he was a naval chaplain for a number of years, started very publicly in the media and on the internet asking Jesus to slaughter my children, Bonnie and myself, to plunder our fields, seize our assets, and to wipe our descendants off the face of the earth for 10 generations. These aren't the smartest people in the world because you really only need biological 1 generation, right? I mean, you wipe the white seeds off, and we're going to spontaneously generate 9 generations later. Like I said before, you can find professional comedians of every ethnicity and every political bent, but I've never found a fundamentalist Christian comedian. They're not very funny. And so I can assure you that the Navy is a freaking disaster. They all are. Next question, anybody? Yes, sir.
I wondered if you get any flack from the Legacy Church here in town.
Or any of those other mega churches where they're mega because the preacher doesn't have to send the money to the home office.
Let me tell you that on Father's Day in 2008, we appeared in a movie, New York Times Critics Pick movie with an Oscar nominee called Constantine's Sword. We had it went all over the country. It got I think an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is the movie judging thing on the internet. And we had just come back from the premiere in Santa Fe. My daughter and I, she was here tonight, but you know she's got to go work on that paper. We were in the house when we had people on the roof. Our attack-trained dogs alerted, and we had people that were in the driveway, and we didn't have weapons at that time. And we went outside, and we turned around, and they painted a swastika and a crucifix next to each other on our house. We heard from every house of worship in this, and then Marty Chavez was mayor at the time. It got into the media. We did one press conference. Everybody covered it. You probably remember it. We heard from every denomination in this town except, I won't say the names. You know the names of the ones that are the large, gigantic, let's see, corner of Wyoming and Academy, gigantic churches out there, probably because they liked it. Come on, people do what they want to do. We're not a complex meal like Chateaubriand. We are a freaking hamburger. You can't use your position of military authority to force your religious view on a helpless subordinate or a member of an indigenous nation that we are occupying. Next question. Sorry, right there. Yes, sir.
Sir, this is all shocking to me. I'm actually a non-commissioned officer in the Air Force, active duty right now. And I haven't heard of any of this stuff before, ever, never. Is this localized at certain bases?
No, no. If you check, do you know who General Herensack is?
No.
Well, he's your commanding general.
Okay.
He's a colonel.
Okay.
And again, as I said before, it's it's something that you know, you see it or you don't see it. Sometimes it's there, but it's and do you know who General Schwartz is?
Yes.
Who is he?
He's a Secretary of
Who is he?
Secretary of the Air Force.
No, that's Michael Donnelly. General Schwartz is the Chief of Staff of the Air
Chief of
Force.
Staff, excuse me, yeah.
We got him to put out a memorandum on September 1st this year, the first time in generations the Pentagon ever spoke on this, saying that we must have religious neutrality because he knew the situation was literally out of control. It was, I call it a solid single in the media. It wasn't a home run, but the bottom line is that, again, I would urge you to buy the book, go to our website, and you will see, you know, an unbelievable amount of material that makes it completely impossible to believe that this isn't true. Next question, anybody? Yes, ma'am.
I know this all
Get a little louder so they can hear you, dear.
Yeah, I know this all started with your son at the Air Force Academy, and that you started kind of an investigation, and I don't think it really went anywhere. What's the latest status of that with the Academy? Has anything really changed, or?
And what's your name?
Emily.
Emily asked the question that started with my son. I actually had two sons at the Academy. Let me tell you who got me into this thing. Mel Gibson. When he came out with his movie in February of 2004, I forget the name, I think it was the Jesus Chainsaw Massacre or Freddy vs. Jesus. That's what I call it. You know, I didn't like the movie because I don't have to like it. I don't care if you like my opinions or not. I'm not running for office. You know, it's the message, not the messenger, right? I saw that movie, and halfway through it, I stood up and accepted Jesus if they would just stop beating the poor guy, right? I saw that movie, and then I found out at the Air Force Academy my two sons and my future daughter-in-law, who married my eldest son, who's at that time a very devout Christian, still is a Christian, were being forced to go see this. You can't go force me to see anything, except maybe the Hunger Games, which was great, you know. But I literally, I look at this saying this has got to be a mistake. For 9 months, I worked with my school. They loved me at the time because I don't know, I was a former White House lawyer. I worked for Ross Perot. I mean, I was a great graduate. I wasn't causing problems back then. And then after 9 months, I realized that that wasn't rain in my face. They were peeing in my face, and it was the time to go into Mikey kill mode. Our job at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation is to lay down a withering field of fire, kick ass, take names, and leave sucking chest wounds on this unconstitutional heart of darkness. Do you understand? Next question. Yes, sir.
Not a question, but a comment and a congratulatory. I was privileged to be at the hotel down by the airport the day you announced the formation. For the last year and a half or whatnot, I've been every year, every month, I get my credit card charged.
Thank you.
That is an advertisement, folks. Get up on your website.
Thank you, brother.
10, 15, 20 bucks a month.
I'm very, very, very appreciative, and thank you for doing that. It is a full tax deduction, unlike giving money to any political candidate. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize for not getting here early. I tried. Who started all this this in the military?
Jesus. Basically, in this book, as well as my first book, I described that. Anybody in here a parent or a grandparent? Okay. Do you remember how you would feel if somebody was hurting your child? Would your life not be forfeit? Right? I mean, that's it. That's it. I mean, I've lived a good life. It's now time to go destroy those that are hurting my children at the Air Force Academy were being called fucking Jews and being accused of complete and total complicity in the execution of Jesus Christ by numerous cadets and numerous people that were there, that were in the hierarchy. Do you think I'm going to take that? Do you think, would any of you take that? Maybe some of you would. I understand that. I understand that you can still be a good person and be a bystander. And let me just read this, damn it. And I don't expect you to be fighters all the time because it's very unpleasant. Like me, even my daughter says, "God, Dad, you seem angry." Really? I wrote the dedication in the book. Like I said, it's a quick read, and I added about the people who help us, and I talked about the people that support us. They show us that we all can and must stand up and fight boldly against the unconstitutional wretchedness of bigotry and prejudice and religious predators. Indeed, one day as a lion is all that may ever be needed to summon the fortitude to fight back against this brutal intolerance. But one never knows when that day comes. When you're a parent, it's there every day. So if you're going to mess with my kids, you know, you're going to mess with me. You want courage? When my son was a third classman at the Air Force Academy, he's a sophomore, like at UNM, or New Mexico Tech or whatever. He went on Good Morning America with me to expose this. If you have any idea, I mean, even the federal courts have described military academies. I used that word earlier tonight, ACR, adversarial, communal, and ritualistic. At a place called VMI, Virginia Military Institute, there was a lawsuit that came out in 2003 by a bunch of cadets that didn't want to have to hear a mandatory prayer, which had gone back a century, at lunchtime. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals came back and said, you know, even standing at attention in that kind of environment with a military academy, even if you listen to a secular prayer, that exacts an unconstitutional toll on religious objectors because of that adversarial, communal, and ritualistic environment. If you haven't been there, you don't know what it feels like. It's like a man trying to be told by a woman what it feels like to give birth. When my wife gave birth, I couldn't understand the pain. I asked one of the doctors, she seems to be in a lot of discomfort. Is this like, I mean, like a really bad indigestion? The doctor pulled me by the ear and said, get out here. Bonnie was, of course, screaming at me. And he explained to me, the doctor did, that in the latter stages of labor, a woman's, the contractions in her abdominal musculature would be strong enough if hooked up to a hydraulic press to lift a dump truck. And then I had these giant eyes, and the doctor said, "Do you think that's worse than bad indigestion?" Wow. Next question. Yes.
I don't have a question. I'm Mikey's mother, and I'm very, very proud of him. But I can't stay any longer because I've got a bad leg, so I hope you'll excuse us if we leave.
Thank you. How about a hand for Mike?
I'm his father, and I have to take her home.
We're going to start signing, so what I'll do is I'll take 3 more quick questions, and I'll be glad to sign until the cows come home. Then I'll go with you, ma'am. Right? Yes, sir.
In Congress, there's now what these events refer to as the war on women. Do women in the military have a particular difficult time with contraception?
Oh, I mean, there's no question. Remember, the people we're fighting are in control of the military. I mentioned one of those stenches. Remember the 10,000 rotting swine I talked about? One of those is misogyny. Fundamentalist Christians believe that women are particularly good at only 2 things: selecting food, preparing food, serving food, cleaning up after meals, and spreading their legs, and raising children. So there's absolutely, listen, in the book we talk about a family, the Bass family, B-A-S-S. Okay. From that bastion of liberality known as Gulfport, Mississippi, the Catholic family send their beloved daughter to the Air Force Academy, and she gets recruited into Cadets for Christ. What is Cadets for Christ? One of those parachurch organizations that was described by Pat Robertson, in the 1970s as being so far fundamentalist that he couldn't deal with them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is like Hitler saying this group of thugs over here is too fascistic for him. He just can't work with them. Cadets for Christ follow something called the quiverful or shepherding movement that says that women are incapable of handling their own lives. They must be assigned through Jesus, and they'll determine what Jesus is, a male shepherd to shepherd them through everything. This was a beautiful young girl at the Air Force Academy who turned down a pilot training slot because ladies don't fly airplanes. You know, they don't fly airplanes. The vibrations in their pilot seats, where they were told you will give them some sort of orgasm, they'll lose situational awareness. It's amazing. I got to tell you, if I put that on eBay, the number of women would buy. But this is, guys, I'm telling you what it is. This is the way it is. So we have 11 other families that would not come forward. The Boss family did. Their relationship with their daughter is still very, very, very tenuous. And of course, if you're a guy, it's great because you're the shepherd. So the bottom line is, if you're being a woman, you've got a massive strike against you already. There's 2 more questions. We're going to start signing. Go ahead.
First of all, tell us your website.
MilitaryReligiousFreedom.org. That was your question? Okay.
She has a
One.
continuum from this. A female could not get a rape kit at the United States Air Force Academy. She had to go in town. Tell them how easy it is to get off site to go in town.
Yeah, if you're at the academy, that's a closed military reservation. It's extremely difficult to leave. Remember, if you leave without permission, it's called AWOL, which is a felony. In the U.S. military, if you're told to go to the base dentist at 4 p.m. and you don't go, it's a felony. There's a whole separate code, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that is totally different than the regular civilian code. Last question. Let's make it a good one, with maybe some sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Anybody?
On sex, his question is great.
Yes, yes, that was right. Yes, sir. One last question, everybody.
My question has to deal with your speaking engagement this last Saturday at Rock Beyond Belief at Fort Bragg. Did you get any response yet whatsoever after calling out by name the commanding brass to start standing up for their subordinates' civil rights?
What the gentleman was talking about 2 years ago, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, headed up by a monster by the name of Franklin Graham, his son, was they were going around to military bases with the full support of the military and evangelizing on the parade field. They would have face painting and rock climbing for the kids. Bands would come in. It was called Rock the Fort. The soldiers at Fort Bragg, and there are 92,000 of them, were given pieces of papers by their commanders with 7 blank names on them to bring 7 other soldiers to Christ. Do you understand how bad this is? The same thing about burning little German Shepherd puppies, the newborn ones with gasoline and throwing the match down, right? So a bunch of non-religious soldiers, we tried to go in to get a federal restraining order to stop it. We had our outside counsel, the law firm called Jones Day, enormous law firm. We had everything set to go. We even had the plaintiffs. We have several hundred plaintiffs, clients of ours at Fort Bragg. All we needed, ladies and gentlemen, was one North Carolina lawyer to speak truth to power, to serve as what we call local counsel. They were basically a mail drop. We went through over 350 of them. Not one would come forward. Not one. I hope they can feel good about looking at themselves. And if they were here with their smarmy faces, smiles on their faces tonight, I'd spit in their faces. Not one. So Rock the Fort came forward. Lieutenant General Helmick, the commanding general, made the statement that he would do this for anybody. So several atheist soldiers and agnostic soldiers came forward and said, really, General? They were able to raise $70,000, and we did Rock Beyond Belief. There were several headliners. Some of you may have read the book The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, myself, a number of other people. We had rappers, we had rock bands, when it became my turn to go speak, and this was on the parade field, there were 1,500 people there. I get a little passionate every now and then. And I decided, I got this big introduction, I got up to the microphone, and I noticed that there are many tents that were out there, and there was one tent that was a yellow tent where all the brass was. So I just got up, and people expected me to yell like I've done a little bit tonight, and I just said, everybody, we just want, we want our civil rights, and we want them now. We want our civil rights. We want them now. We want our civil rights. We want them now. We can't flip the bird, but make a fist and point over there to the yellow tent. Colonel Szynski, Garrison Commander, listen to your American brothers and sisters. Ladies and gentlemen, what do we want? We want our civil rights. When do we want them? Now. Lieutenant General Helmick, listen to your American brothers and sisters. General Odierno, Ray Odierno, Army Chief of Staff, listen to your American brothers and sisters. The Honorable John McHugh, Army Secretary, listen to your American brothers and sisters. Leon Panetta, Defense Secretary, listen to your American brothers and sisters. President Obama, listen to them. And they had so many military police with their German Shepherds there, people started getting nervous. But that whole idea of the call and response, we want our civil rights, we want them now. I haven't seen it on the video yet, but apparently it made a strong impression. Did that answer your question? I'm going to sign books. Thank you for being here tonight. Please buy several. Help us out. And thank you again for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. If y'all can help with folding up the chairs that you're sitting on, and just set them back against the bookcases anywhere.